Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk with Superintendent Lawley. I'm Elizabeth Lawley, and today we will be discussing the 2022 Ohio State Report Card, which was released in mid-September. I'm joined by two principals whose schools showed significant progress this year. Principal Karen Cicchetti joins us from Belmont High School, and Principal Thurman Sampson joins us from Roosevelt Elementary. To begin, I'd like to discuss the overall district report card and then have each principal share more about their individual school report cards. This year, the Ohio Department of Education rated schools using a star system. Schools received a 1 through 5 stars rather than an A through F rating. We're pleased to see that the district is back to where we were pre-pandemic, which is significant because many schools have not fully recovered from their COVID declines. Overall, the district earned 2 stars on the report card with 2 stars in progress and 2 stars in gap closing. Gap closing measures how well a district meets performance expectations for students in English language arts, math, and graduation. It also measures how well schools are supporting English learners to increase language proficiency. It shows how the school district reduces chronic absenteeism, and it also identifies gifted students and how gifted services are provided. These results are very promising, and we believe we will continue to see improvements because of the recovery efforts that are still in place, including our double teaching model in grades 1 through 3. Individual schools also showed great progress on the report card this year. Charity Adams, Horace Mann, Mound Street Academy, and Roosevelt each earned 4 stars in gap closing, and 9 schools received 3 stars in gap closing. To begin with, Mr. Sampson, can you please share more about Roosevelt's report card and the improvements that have been made?
Sure. On our report card, we received 4 stars in gap closing, and we received 4 stars in progress. We were very excited about that.
And I'm very excited about that as well because Roosevelt's a relatively new building.
Yes.
You have a relatively new staff. And you've been working at improving the school for several years because it was a school that we put in place with 2 other schools joining together. And you've been able to mesh those staffs together. You've been able to really create the environment for this school improvement to be seen fairly quickly. What are some of the things that you did as a principal and as a school team to make sure that these improvements were seen this year?
Well, collaboration was very important. We had to bring everybody together in order to have a common vision, and our vision was growth. And so once we had a vision that we were all going to come together and grow, we then needed to know and understand the data. So once we knew and understood the data, that means including the MAP data, DIBELS data, Ed Insight data, just how it all came together, we then wanted to set instructional targets. Once we set the targets, we then created a plan focused on fidelity. We wanted to make sure that we utilize gradual release with fidelity and instruction with fidelity. The plan was really simple. We told our assistant principal, I asked my assistant principal to please be sure to read and review every lesson plan. So all of the lesson plans that were taught by the teachers were really taught with fidelity. We gave each child from kindergarten to 6th grade data binders so they knew and owned their data. They knew where they were, and they also knew where they're supposed to go. Finally, we broke things down by 4 simple questions that you could ask really any student in the building. You could ask a child, what are you learning? And they should give you an instructional objective. The second question is, how can this help you in real life? And we were looking for the child to say something with relevance. The third question was, how do you know if your work is good enough? If it's good enough, that means there's a rubric. And then that last question is, do you need any help? But those simple pieces just really meshed our building together.
Excellent. I really like some of those ideas. I know that gradual release is the model that we use across the district, and for those of you that aren't aware of what gradual release means, it means that the teacher does a lesson. We call that portion the I do. So a teacher models the lesson for the entire class, and then the teacher guides students through something called a we do. And that we do is we do it together, or we might do it in a small group, or we might do it by ourselves while the teacher monitors to see if the student actually understood that instruction. They walk around the classroom and make sure that a student got it. Before we ever do any kind of independent work on the you do it by yourself phase, we want to make sure that students are not practicing mistakes and that they actually have been taught and retaught if necessary. So in using that kind of model in the classrooms, you believe that you've seen some major growth in the instructional practice and in the learning process that's occurring at Roosevelt Elementary?
Yes, because it made sense. And it was something that I could model, and we could even use it when we were dealing with discipline, like the routines in the cafeteria. I do, and then we do, and you do. It was really a strong portion, and it moved us in the right direction. A final piece that you had allowed us to have this year was parent partnership. McKinley came, and we invited them to be a part of some of our meetings. So when our parent groups, when we met with the kids after school, the same work that they were working with those children were the same things that they learned during the summer when we came together to learn more about the Marzano strategies.
I know that one strategy that we really have been working on for the last 3 or 4 years is small group instruction.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about small group instruction as it works in your classrooms at Roosevelt?
Sure. We knew that small group instruction was important, but it became real when we decided to be really focused on what we were going to do about moving these scores up. So what we did, in the mornings, we gave each teacher a group of children. So I think it was about a 1 hour block where you would find throughout the building, children were broken up into small groups. One group had the group that you could say, you don't want to say that they're high, but they're the ones that you could really see were really ready to test. The second group, their focus was working on the ones on the bubble. And then you had the babies. We started that with 3rd grade, where we had a really big jump because our whole goal was for our children to pass. So we just felt like if they could just learn how to read, we could move them forward. So it was really amazing. And having the dual teachers gave more adults time to put a lot of attention to the children in small blocks. And I think that was why we had such a big jump in our 3rd grade. And our older grades did something similar.
Excellent. For those that may not know what the dual teaching is that he referred to, we have double teachers in all of our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade classrooms. And the way that we do that is one teacher in that classroom focuses all on the literacy piece, and then the other teacher focuses on math. So they're teaching at the same time a small group. One teacher is facing one direction perhaps, teaching the reading portion of the day, and then the other part of the class is actually learning math from that teacher. And then they switch the classes, and then 2 or 3 times a day, I believe they have small groups based upon the needs of the students.
Yes.
So the reading teacher calls up a group of students that may not have gotten something while the other students are working on their intervention, which is usually software based, or working in workshop time, doing independent work that they know about and that they're responding to. For example, maybe a writing lesson or something like that. So the double teaching model has shown significant improvements across the district where it's been implemented appropriately and correctly, and we're so happy that we're able to fund that through our ESSER money, the ARPA money that we receive from the federal government, and through our Title I money. So we're able to fund that and keep that going in our classrooms. We hired about 100 teachers across the district in order to do that in every one of our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade classrooms. So I think some of the work that you'll see this coming school year with our test results for the Ohio State test again, I think that will be a reflection of what your 2nd grade teachers did with those students that are now 3rd graders, because we only test 3rd graders that would have had that double teaching model at this point. So it'll be very significant to see what happens with those 3rd grade scores this coming year,
yes,
and then to see what you continue to do with your 4th grade through 6th grade. Thank you so much for sharing that. Principal Cicchetti, your scores are much different than they have been. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing at Belmont with your staff to make sure that students are learning and growing and that your test scores are improving?
So last year we met as a team, we looked at the data, and we noticed that our ESL, a lot of our subgroups, one of them being ESL, OEC, which is our special ed, that we weren't making the gains that we wanted to make. We also noticed that a lot of our students were having to repeat a class. So we put some things into place to help improve those subgroups. For example, our ESL population, we were only 1.8 just below state standard, so we grew immensely in that area. Our OEC grew a little, but we still got a long way to go, and we're working on that. Our students that were off track, putting the credit recovery program in place after school, offering it for free. Students could stay after school and catch up on any class that they might have failed, has helped. We only scored like 20% below, and we've moved that needle too. If you look at our graduation rate, we scored 98% last year in our graduation rate with the numbers, compared to the 87 and the 76 prior to that. So we're growing in that area. We're trying to get our students back on track through the credit recovery, through the interventions that we're doing throughout the day, and that has led us to where we are right now.
Excellent. Now, you have, in your building, you have a very high population of English students that are non-English speaking.
Correct.
So what are some of the things that your classroom teachers are doing to make sure that those students understand what's happening in that classroom, because your scores are very good in that area? So what's actually happening with those students that the teachers are working with in your building?
So we did a co-teaching model with our ESL population, and obviously, with our OEC population, where we have teachers going into the classrooms, working with them, pulling them into small groups, similar to Mr. Thurman here, trying to build them up and get them where they need to be.
Excellent. What's the parent response to that with us, especially with our ESL students? Because many of our parents also don't speak the language, they don't speak English. How do we make sure that they're involved in that process and understanding how important it is for their students to do well in school?
So everything that I should say, any communication that we have is done in their language to try and get them to come in for meetings and everything. We send everything out in their language. We are also, this year, prior to we had the COVID and the pandemic, so we were unable to have meetings. So now we're back into the swing of having PTO meetings. We've invited parents from all the community and all the groups we have, because we have over 26 different countries. So making sure everything is in their language when we send it out so that they feel invited. We have interpreters coming for open house events and teacher conferences to try to make them feel a part of our community, because they are, and we want to include them. And that's why we've had significant growth, because we are trying to communicate with everyone in their language to make them feel like they're part of the city of Belmont.
Excellent, excellent. I know that people really push to get into Belmont whenever they're an English language learner. I think because they feel the community there that you've built over the time. I want to commend you for that, because it's extremely important that they feel part of it.
Thank you.
I know that you're also using, I know both of you are, using a multi-tiered level of support systems. And in talking about that multi-tiered system, every student on Tier 1 receives the core instruction. It is core instruction. It's what we're supposed to be teaching according to the Ohio Department of Education curriculums. It is what every student needs to have to be successful. And then there's a Tier 2, which provides intervention, and it could be intervention that's on your level, or it can be intervention that pushes you to the next level, or it can be intervention that is remediation. And that's a group of students that we have as well that receive that type of intervention. And then we have a Tier 3 intervention. That's about 20% typically across the nation of students that need specialized Tier 3 supports. What are some of those supports that either one of you might have in place in your buildings for that Tier 3 support, so our parents know what we're doing for those students that are really struggling, trying to catch them up and make them part of this whole process of improving that score and that gap closing, making sure that they are achieving academically?
So some of the things that we put in place, the first thing we did is we have a PSC attendance team. So that team meets weekly to work on the Tier 1, the Tier 2, and the Tier 3. The other thing we added the last year, and we've added again this year, is our advisory time. So based off of the PSC and the attendance team, and then we take that to the advisory team also to try and do some interventions just through the advisory, like tracking sheets for all students so they can track their scores, they can track where they're at for graduation, they can track which classes they need, which supports they need. The other thing that we did after school is we've offered, like I said, that credit recovery, and then we've offered academic success with our ETS, which is our Sinclair program, so the students can get extra tutoring and support through that. But the communication with all three groups is we have like our assistant principals sit on all three groups, so the flow of communication is going back and forth through all of them, because we want to reach not only our Tier 1, which is everyone, but our Tier 2 and definitely our Tier 3. And then when we get to the Tier 3, our counselors step in, and then we also have one-on-one meetings with their parents and with the students to see where they're at and how we can meet their needs.
Excellent, excellent. And that communication with the parent is so vital and so important to make sure that the student has support at home, and to make sure that we support the parent in any way that we need to with the academics for their students. So that's extremely important. Mr. Sampson, is it similar for you or slightly different?
Well, it's slightly different, but similar. We have a pyramid, and we base it off of steps as well as tiers. Yeah. And the teacher is almost looked upon as the case coordinator of that student. So, of course, Tier 1 or Step 1, everyone does receive the same exact instruction. But if the teacher notices or has a concern about the student, whether it's academics or whether it is with behavior, their first step is to first consult with the parent and have a conversation with their teaching team to say, hey, I'm kind of concerned that the following is not happening. Either the child is not able to clearly understand the passage, but whatever the place is, our advantage is we're right next to the clinic. And so at that first step, we want to make sure that those babies get an opportunity to go to the clinic, because it could be their vision, it could be their hearing, it could be their dental. We don't know what the case is, but we want all children to have that within that first step if there's a concern. Then the second step, the teacher can then speak to someone that's maybe at a different level. They might meet with the intervention specialist. They might meet with me and start developing behavior improvement plans or something specific for that child, just in case that we can handle that cat at that second level. The final level is when we might consider a multi-factor evaluation, what we can do to test it. So instead of the children needing to quote unquote be tested at that first step, we want to go through layers like that. But that's just what we're doing, like towards our intervention assistance process. But when it comes to what the teachers are doing with instruction on the larger level, it's very similar to what you mentioned. You do have the first tier of instructional objectives, and then the second tier where they're working in those small groups, and then that last tier when you're really concentrating to get those kids what they need. And it's been a journey, but I think we're moving in the right direction with that.
I think the district as a whole is moving in the right direction, and we have some really strong programs in both of your buildings for that model, that tiered system of support model. The district uses something called the Ohio Improvement Process,
yes.
And we really got down to needing some additional training about that. About the time that I became the superintendent, we started a very in-depth training with your building leadership teams. And building leadership teams are people on your staff, they can be people that you've invited from the business community, or they can also include parents if you wanted to do that. But the building leadership teams are an extremely important part of the data process, and both of you mentioned data and looking at data. So we have cohort trainings for building leadership teams that occur about 5 times a year, where we pull everybody out and we actually go for a day and work through processes for how the building leadership team can look at data, what they need to do to refine that. This year the focus actually is on looking at data through an equity lens and making sure that what any student might need is what we're providing for them in that classroom, but we have to know that student very well through the data points and through just the personality of that student. There's also a piece of that puzzle called the teacher-based team, and that's a TBT, and those TBTs meet regularly in your building. They may be departments that meet together, they may be grade levels that meet together, and then there's a district leadership team, which is a representative from every building that meets monthly to go over the district data that's been collected from your TBT to your BLT to your district level representative, and we look at all of that data. I'd just like for you to reflect for a minute or two about that process. You both were here whenever it really wasn't a very strong process, and we were in the beginning stages of it about 5 years ago. And today, if you reflect a little bit about what that data work actually has done for your building and what you might think it's done for the district as a whole.
Well, I can say, like, today is Tuesday for us, and this is TBT day. And it is a really big sacrifice if you're really trying to do this with fidelity. But what we, in the beginning, the data belonged really to the principal, and we would be the ones that knew the data, and we'd present the data and have this conversation. In this new era, the data belongs to the team. And so the team is expected to look at this data, break that data down, and put it in the form before the meeting even begins. So then when we do sit down, we're talking about, what did you learn from the data? What do you think about the data? And at first I was very impatient because I want to get to that next step. Let's go to step 3. But we can't do it that way because we really have to really discuss what's going on, and that's why our focus was fidelity. I think I have a term I say, what puts the stank on it is what's going on with our BLT training now with equity. No matter how well you put together these processes, you have to have that understanding of the child that you're teaching. And you have to start looking at, they had given us a example of equity with a tall child, a short child, and a child in a wheelchair trying to look over the fence. And you had to give certain kids needed certain interventions in order to be at the same pace. So you just can't keep giving people the same things. So we're now at this point where we're trying to really slowly have those courageous conversations while working with the data. So what I like about this OIP process is that it gives the teachers a clear ownership of the data. Our frustrations would be, it is time consuming, and it may take more than one meeting to complete all 5 steps of the process.
And that's something that we've heard over time, but I believe from the practice and the work that's been done that it's getting faster than it was 5 years ago.
And better.
Because I remember 5 years ago, people asked, can we have a whole month to do this data cycle? Can we have a whole month to do these 5 steps? And now today, I think it's maybe, sometimes it's a couple of weeks just depending on the data, but it's never typically longer than that, which is real improvement. And it helps us get back to that student faster because we've analyzed the data, we know what needs to happen, and we get back to that student individually a little bit faster. Ms. Cicchetti, what happens with your TBT, BLT work that we might want to share with our audience today?
Okay. Well, we start out in July meeting as a BLT. I love our BLT team. They do an amazing job. Our BLT team is also our department chairs. So they're able to communicate everything that goes on in the BLT with their departments. And so we started out back in July meeting, coming up with our 100-day plan for the year based off the district goals and based off our building goals. So we want to make sure, again, everything's flowing together so that we're meeting everything that we need to meet, but most importantly, we're meeting our students' needs of where they're at based off the district goals. So after the BLT, the department chairs run our TBTs, not the admin. We sit there, our department chairs, BLT team, they run their TBT teams. They bring the data based off the Ed Insights, the map, whatever they're looking at, and then as a department, they share out what's going on. And then from there, they come up with the strategies that they'd like to implement and then bring back. It is a lot faster than it was when we first started out 5 years ago. Now it's, we meet weekly. Our BLT team meets bi-weekly so that we can move the process along a little faster also. So to meet to get back to the students, back in the classrooms.
And I think the work that you've done with your TBTs, your BLTs, and the work that you both contribute to the district leadership team really has a significant impact on the work that you do and the work that's seen through these test results for your buildings. So I'm really, really pleased that the students are back on track to the pre-pandemic levels. Those achievement levels were difficult to reach in 2019, but we're back. So we're very, very pleased with that. I'd like to thank you for being my guest today and sharing the wonderful work that you're both doing at Roosevelt Elementary and at Belmont High School. You two are tremendous leaders and you're doing a great job, and I just want to thank you and applaud you and your teams for the work that they're doing to get those gaps closed and that achievement level back up. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Straight Talk with Superintendent Lawley. If you'd like to view your school's report card, please visit Ohio Department of Education's website at education.ohio.gov. And thank you for joining us.